You're good.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. This is an informational call for our non-qualified deferred compensation program. We are joined by a few of our folks from the company who manages the whole program for us, and they are going to give us some of the ins and outs of the program, some of the IRS guidelines, give you guys as much information as they can to help you make an informed decision on how you want to use this program, and also explain the steps to signing up and opting in. As we said earlier today on the company call, this is a once in a year enrollment situation, so it was important for us to have this call so that if anybody is interested for the next calendar year, you're able to make your elections now. So I will go ahead and kick this off with Chris, and take it away.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you. Appreciate it. Good seeing everyone today. We really appreciate your time here in advance. My name's Chris Schneider. I'm with Tribridge Partners, and we serve as the advisor on the non-qualified deferred compensation plan. We also have Josh Owen with Principal Financial Group on the call with me today. Josh is the Regional Vice President of Principal, so he'll probably do most of the heavy lifting of the presentation, but please feel free to ask questions and interject throughout the presentation as well. So we started this program last year. As many of you are aware, I know there's a few names on here that we've met with last year who were participating in the plan, and we'll talk through considerations for those already participating in the plan. Anyone who's new to the program, please again feel free to ask questions. We do have an open enrollment window that should be in December of this year. So we wanted to have this call in advance so you understand all the moving parts of this, non-qualified plan. But when we had originally set the plan up last year, we actually worked on this for about a year, and it was really developed to be a supplemental retirement plan for many of you who are with Premier. And so at the time, there was not a 401k benefit. There was really a desire for Steve and Stephen to create an attractive benefit for you all to be able to defer dollars on a tax-deferred basis, choose investments like a 401k. And the nice thing about the non-qualified plans is that they're extremely flexible. So Josh and I will go through that a little bit later on in the presentation, but really the intent here was to really provide a very generous benefit to you all. And hopefully we'll have some of you who express interest. Me and my team are available to you if you have questions down the road or want to set up time with us to go through the plan. We're happy to do it. I know Josh and his team will also be offering resources for anyone who wants to have a one-on-one consultation in December. So we'll be in touch with our availability. But with that said, Josh, I'll pass it to you, and then we'll go from there, and I'll chime in when appropriate.
Yeah, appreciate that, and good afternoon, everybody. I am sharing my screen, so hopefully technology is working and everybody can follow along with me. But before I get into the content, just fleshing out some of the housekeeping items, if you will. As was mentioned, this is a once-a-year enrollment opportunity. The opportunity will be the month of December, so just trying to get this information to you so you can be thinking about it as early in the process as possible. Those of you that are already in the plan, actively participating for 2023, if you like what you're doing currently and don't plan on making any changes, you don't have to take any action. Your current elections will automatically carry forward to next year. It's just that this is your one opportunity, the month of December, for you to make any adjustments to increase or decrease your level of participation, make other changes, which we'll talk about. And for those of you not in the plan, the month of December is your only opportunity to sign up for the plan for 2024. So stay tuned for communication on exactly when the enrollment event opens up. On Friday, December 1st, you'll have communication coming to you when that officially opens. So for today's agenda, we do want to start at a very high level to make sure everybody fully understands the basics of how a non-qualified deferred compensation plan works. I typically find that the best way to explain how these plans operate is to compare and contrast against a 401k plan. since most people are familiar, at least at a high level, with how 401k plans work. And as we get into that compare and contrast, you'll find out pretty quickly that this plan is more complicated than a 401k, but it's more complicated for a reason. There is a lot more flexibility here for you. All the more reason I'd say take Chris up on his offer. We'll end with his contact information and agree. One-on-one conversation is always the best way to make sure you're extracting maximum value out of the program. So we'll try to talk through some different strategies that other individuals utilize to make this fit into their personal financial planning. And we'll end with those specific decision points you'll need to make during the month of December to get enrolled. But at the highest possible level, we've gone through great lengths to make this plan look, feel, and operate as much like a 401k plan or a traditional IRA as possible. And what that means is that you're able to defer money pre-tax right through payroll. That's going to go into this plan that you can access at principal.com or through the mobile app. There'll be a menu of diversified investment options that you can self-direct how your account balance is invested. It'll all grow tax deferred, and you're not going to pay any tax on those dollars until you decide to pull them out of the plan. So again, that's exactly how an IRA or a 401k plan works. But this is not a 401k or an IRA. It's a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. And that word non-qualified just means we're not qualified by ERISA. And ERISA is that governing body over all qualified plans that places limitations, restrictions, etc. So this plan is not subject to any of those restrictions or limitations, which is what's going to provide all that additional flexibility. We'll go into great detail, but just be aware on the front end, there's no dollar amount limit on how much you could put away. You could theoretically defer 100% of your compensation pre-tax if you'd like to. That's the amount of flexibility you have on the front end. And then on the back end, we don't have the same distribution restrictions or penalties either, which means that you have access to these dollars even before 59.5 with no penalty, which is unlike most qualified plans, which are exclusively for retirement, and you're penalized if you take it early. So looks and feels just like a 401k, taxed just like a 401k, much more flexible than a 401k. And that's the benefit of being non-qualified. The downside of being non-qualified is that this plan doesn't get the same inherent government protection that qualified plans like IRAs and 401k plans get. So we would always want to make sure that you are maximizing those qualified plans to whatever extent possible first, and then view and utilize this plan as the IRS intends it to be used, which is going to be as a supplemental plan that sits on top of your qualified plans like 401k, IRA, etc. So why it's important to have access to a supplemental plan like this is illustrated in the visual before you, which is that when you're meeting with your financial advisors and you're talking about retirement, they're probably telling you a percentage of your income as the goal of what you need to save. It's no longer a dollar amount nest egg. It's a replacement goal of your current compensation. It's the better way to think about retirement, but the math breaks down at certain income levels, right? Because all qualified plans have dollar amount limits to them. 401ks, IRAs, even Social Security has a dollar amount cap. So if you're trying to replace a percentage and you're constantly being capped at a dollar amount, you're going to end up with a retirement gap. And that's where this non-qualified plan comes in and fills that gap because there are no dollar amount limits. So people that don't have access to a non-qualified plan are going to have to fill that gap using after-tax dollars. And that's the benefit of this plan, is it lets you fill that gap using pre-tax dollars. So just taking everybody back to freshman year of college real quick, that Finance 101, just comparing a pre-tax saving strategy like a 401k or this non-qualified plan against an after-tax strategy like a brokerage account. Really the only difference would be this magical thing called compounded tax deferred growth. So the big assumption baked into the cake here for this graph is that we're assuming your tax rate today is the exact same as your tax rate later when you take money out of the plan. We don't have a crystal ball, have no idea where tax rates are going to go, so just bear with me for a moment. If tax rates today are the same as tax rates later, then if you've got a 10-year time horizon to retirement, you're going to end up with about 12% more money in a pre-tax strategy compared to being paid tax on the gains each year along the way. And if your time horizon to retirement's even longer, that delta just compounds further. The big assumption, however, here was that the tax rate today and the tax rate later are the same. That's where people that are participating in these non-qualified plans are typically in a unique financial position such that they're putting money in when they're in their peak earning years. When you're making the most money you're going to make of your entire career, which means you're paying the highest marginal taxes you're going to pay of your entire career. So just talking federal taxes for a moment, every dollar you put into this plan comes off the top, right? So you're likely saving 32, 35, 37 cents on the dollar for everything you put into this plan. And then on the back end, and this is where if you utilize the non-qualified plan properly, you're going to end up with much better results than that graph showing you the difference in a pre and a post-tax strategy, because you'll want to structure your distributions such that this plan is the first retirement income dollars you take. So simple example being that if you think you're going to retire at 65, but you want to wait until 72 before taking Social Security, before taking those IRA distributions, you could structure your non-qualified plan to pay out over 7 years of installments between 65 and 72 when it's likely your only income source. So the effective tax rate you're paying on those distributions is substantially lower than the high marginal taxes you're saving on the front end. So here in this very basic graph of showing you how to bridge the gap between your working years and your retirement years really showcases the two primary reasons people participate. Number one is if you do this properly, not only are you going to delay when you pay tax and get compounded tax deferred growth all along the way, but you're ultimately going to pay less tax. And most people are interested in paying less tax. But more importantly, it's also going to allow your primary retirement dollars to be more efficient, right? This non-qualified plan is not intended to be your primary retirement dollars. This is a supplemental plan. But being able to have an income stream for 2, 3, 5, 10 years once you actually retire so that you don't have to start taking distributions from those primary sources is just going to increase your chances of having and keeping a successful retirement. So then kind of segueing over a little bit into enrollment and the decision points folks will need to make next month. Plenty of reasons why people do enroll into plans like this. Number one, saving for retirement seems pretty obvious on the surface, but if I peel the onion back one more layer, talked to a lot of people during the enrollment process that previously thought retirement success was unattainable, right? Because if you're behind the 8 ball, it is really difficult to play catch up if everywhere you turn, you're being capped out again at a dollar amount. So the benefit of this plan is that no matter how far behind you might be with your retirement savings, the fact that you have the ability to sock away, just making an example, half of your compensation for a few years means that you can play catch up, get to where you need to be in a short period of time. So many people are very, very thankful for a plan like this to allow them to get to where they need to be. Second line item there, taxable compensation. Also, oftentimes I'm talking to people who are engaging their CPAs or tax consultants for this decision. Right? You might have a decent idea of what your 2024 compensation is going to be. You just takes a quick Google search to figure out what the closest tax threshold is to you. And again, since there's no dollar amount limit on what you could put away, you could roughly calculate how much money you would need to defer so you don't end up with any compensation taxed above that threshold. And that's how you can manage your taxes most efficiently on the front end, in addition to all the distribution efficiency we talked about earlier. And then finally, haven't talked about it yet, but we will. In addition to the retirement supplementation, the lack of early withdrawal penalties here means that there are ability to save for shorter term savings needs and non-retirement needs as well. So really, for the enrollment, for those of you that are already in it or new, you really need to start with this first question of what are you saving for? We do assume everybody has a goal to eventually retire, so everybody will have a retirement goal built in there when you first go to enroll. But what are other goals that you have? What other large financial savings goals that you might want to set up so that we could then back into, well, when do you need to receive a distribution to satisfy each of those goals? How do you need to invest your dollars along the way to give you the best chance of success for those goals? And how much can you afford out of your paycheck to direct towards each of these goals? But in our enrollment system, everything starts with the first question there on the left, which is, what are your goals? What are you saving for? And it can literally be anything. We commonly see people setting aside dollars to supplement their 529 plans for their children or grandchildren. We see people setting aside dollars and systematic payroll deducted dollars going into an account that'll ultimately pay out in a lump sum as a down payment on a beach house, as an example. Or it could just be that, again, you're behind in where you need to be for retirement savings, and so you're marking this as supplemental retirement or any combination thereof. You can have as many goals established for yourself in this plan as you want. There are no limits. Of goals, however, you can choose from. So I just want to take a moment to explain the difference. I mentioned everybody's going to start with a retirement goal. Those are going to be dollars that you're setting aside for yourself that will start paying out to you once you leave Premier. My prior example, retire at 65, wait till 72, you'll take 7 years of installments. You can choose anywhere from lump sum up to 10 annual installments. But again, retirement goals will be dollars that start to pay out to you when you leave Premier. So think about these as event-driven distributions. You leave the start getting paid. The alternative would be these shorter-term savings goals. And instead of being event-driven distributions, these are date-driven. You can set aside dollars and say, I want this account, this goal paid out to me September 1st, 2025. I'll pay for my kids' college. Right? Again, you can have as many goals as you want. You just need to say, is this a retirement goal that's going to pay out when I leave, or a shorter term savings goal that's going to pay out on the date that I select? The whole point here is that this is your compensation. You've earned it. This plan just gives you the ability to dictate when you want to pay tax on that compensation. And example I'll use here is that if you don't have large expenses coming up in 2024, maybe you don't need to receive and pay tax on all of your compensation in 2024. Instead, defer some of that compensation into future years where you anticipate needing that extra compensation due to projected expenses, and again, get compounded tax deferred growth between point A and point B. So this is just an example of how somebody might structure their individual benefit. Each of you can structure this however you want for yourself. In this example, I've got a kid going to college in 5 years. So I'm setting up an account to pay out over 4 installments there. I've got another account where the bulk of my dollars will sit. That's going to pay out over 7 installments when I retire, that example I used earlier. And now I've got a secondary retirement account with some smaller dollars in it that's going to pay out in a lump sum. Maybe I want to go travel the world, go on a cruise when I retire, right? That's an individual election. Each person each year gets to decide how much money you're putting in the plan and how it's allocated amongst these goals. I do want to use this visual as a launching point, however, to 2 things. Number 1, dive deeper and put some numbers around a concept I teed up earlier, which is why most people should take installment distributions versus a lump sum. And then after that, I'm going to dig into the most complicated topic about these plans, which is your ability to later adjust these shorter term savings goals. Because what you see here is great if life goes according to plan, but we all know life doesn't always go according to plan. So we need to talk about what ability do you have to make adjustments. The short answer is the IRS does allow you to make adjustments. The longer answer is the IRS never makes anything easy. So we'll talk about the rules that exist there. But first, let's talk about installments versus a lump sum. There was earlier a slide that kind of breezed over, but a hypothetical individual was deferring money off of a 32% marginal tax rate when they were deferring money into the plan. If we extrapolated that example forward, this individual ends up with an account balance of just over $500,000 at retirement, and a lump sum distribution would net a little over 30% effective tax rate on that distribution. So from the outside looking in, this non-qualified plan was hugely successful for this person. Not only did they get compounded tax deferred growth for the entire duration they were in the program, but ultimately paying 30.25% tax on the back end is better than paying 32% tax on the front end. But you can see just below that how much more efficient, how much more effective it could be by simply spreading that account balance, spreading that tax liability out over multiple tax years. Again, you can choose anywhere between lump sum up to 10 annual installments. Most people should, at a minimum, choose 2 or 3. Again, avoiding that lump sum, it is an option, but hopefully the math here will persuade people to spread that out over at least a few years. Again, most people, the thought process is going to be to pull out that crystal ball and ask yourself two very important questions. Best guess, when do you think you're going to retire? And then separately, in an ideal world, how old will you be when you start drawing full retirement income, including Social Security? And whatever the difference between those two answers is probably the proper number of installments you should be setting up for yourself. All right, now as promised, the complicated topic. I'm going to use this college fund example to talk through our ability to adjust. And so this is where the IRS calls this the 12/5 rule, where if you have a shorter goal set up and the distribution date already determined, you are not allowed to adjust to get that money sooner than initially scheduled. You could adjust to push it further out. And because the IRS doesn't like people playing around from one tax year to the next, you can't just push it out a couple of days. You have to push it out a minimum of 5 years. So here's how Principal will attempt to simplify an admittedly complicated rule, but more importantly, then I'll tell you about how we see this playing out in the real world, right? So first, how we operate is that any of these shorter term savings accounts that you have established, you'll be notified 13 months before that distribution is scheduled. That'll serve as both your reminder, but it also opens up a 30 window online for you to go online. And if you no longer want it at that date, simply choose a new future date, right? So that's how we'll try to automate it. In the real world, what we see is that even though you could, in this example, push this account from 2032 out to 2037 or 2038, 39, what we typically see is dollars being pushed out until a time when people know they're going to need those dollars, which is going to be retirement. So on the surface, yes, this is a complicating rule, but in reality, it gives you the ability to set aside tax advantage dollars today for short-term needs and intermediate-term needs, and then later, as it gets closer to those dates, reassess and reapply those dollars to be retirement dollars for yourself. And there's no financial penalty of making that adjustment. So it allows you to make short-term decisions now that end up being long-term benefits for you later. And speaking of flexibility, kind of round home here towards the end, I love this visual because it does a great job of showcasing all the flexibility we've talked about so far in one nice visual. Again, you can defer anywhere from 0 to 100% of your compensation pre-tax. You can set up as many goals, or what's illustrated here as buckets, as you want. You decide how much of your deferrals is being allocated to each of these accounts. You get to decide when these dollars pay out to you in the future, how they pay out to you in the future. But what we really haven't talked about yet is at the bottom. Through the Principal website, through the mobile app, you'll have the ability to control or manage each of these goals independently. I'm specifically talking about from an investment perspective. So you'll be able to customize the investment portfolio to the time horizon associated with each of these goals you've set up. So in this example, you would want to be much more conservatively invested in Mary's college goal, which is paying out in just a few years, compared to your retirement goal, much longer time horizon, paying out over installments. And again, you'll have that level of customization available to you right through the website, and that's where Chris and his team could be invaluable to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. For each of the goals that you'll be setting up, you will be asked during the enrollment process to set up an initial investment allocation. So if you're setting up 20 goals, you'll be asked that question 20 times. I just ask, please don't spend too much time on that, because just like a 401k, you can change your investments whenever you want to. What you really want to think long and hard about is going to be a couple of items. Number one is, what percentage of your pay do you want to defer? Because once you make that election, as was mentioned on the front end of this call, that's once per year. You cannot change that mid-year. If you say, I want to defer 10% of my compensation, that's 10% of all compensation from January 1st to December 31st of next year. So you really want to make sure you've thought through the percentage of compensation to defer pre-tax, and then how you want to structure these goals, right? When and how in the future do you want to structure your distributions? Those are the decisions that are once per year. Investments can be changed at any time. So again, the enrollment dates, you'll be communicated more later with some specifics and some great materials to help you dive as deep as you'd like to into the content and the flexibility here. But opening up on Friday, December 1st, closing Friday, December 29th, 4 full weeks for you to make your elections. Again, this is the only opportunity. If you fail to take action here, you're out of luck for a full 365 days. If you have any issues logging in, and this will all get circulated, unfortunately, neither my team nor Chris's team can help you. There is an 800 number there. Otherwise, Chris, I'll kind of hand it over to you for anybody that is looking for some one-on-one guidance, want to know how to invest their accounts, how to structure their benefits. I've got Chris's contact information and email address listed right here for you. So with that, I'll open up any questions that we might have, any closing commentary for Chris, Stephen, anybody else.
See, a question came through about, Josh, the disadvantages.
Yeah, really the only disadvantages are going to be, number one, it doesn't come with ERISA protection like 401ks or IRAs, et cetera, which just means that, let's talk about the worst case scenario. If Premier goes insolvent, goes bankrupt, you're not technically guaranteed these dollars like you would be guaranteed by the government qualified plan dollars. And then number two, it's kind of that last thing we talked about, that you can't adjust your deferral percentage from paycheck to paycheck. It is at once a year election, more like health benefits. So you do need to do a little bit of pre-planning on it.
Yeah, I think it was well done, Josh. Thanks so much. I think also keep in mind these types of plans typically are only available to executives. So if we are designing this for most of our clients, they are selecting, the top 10% of their workforce to offer this to. So having access to this type of plan is really unique and something that, the majority of employees we work with do not have access to it. So it's the flexibility there to be able to, go outside of the IRS limits that a 401k provides, outside the limits of an IRA, hugely beneficial. The distribution flexibility, also very unique. But the look and feel is going to be very similar to a 401k. You're going to log in, choose investments. Again, I'm available. My team is available. If you have any questions about the investment offerings or the enrollment process, we're happy to do that in December. But what other questions do you all have at this point?
Do you have a list of what those investment options are and what their historic return is?
Yes, it's all available. And when you go to the website, all Morningstar generated data and as much detail as you'd want on any of those individual investment options. You can drill down and we also have those Morningstar fact sheets available on all the investment options.
And there's no limits on how much you could actually put in it?
Up to you have to choose a percentage, but it's up to 100%. You could theoretically say I want to defer 100% of compensation, and at the end of the year you've got zero taxable income.
Anybody else have any questions? Assume that a no. This was something that, as I said, it took us about a year to put together. It is very nuanced, but it was kind of a cool thing we couldn't pass up. Really neat options. I mean, I can pretty much guarantee we're the only real estate company around here that offers this. So I hope you guys will look at this and consider taking advantage of it, because it's really something unique and it could make a big difference on your tax bill at the end of the year if you do it right.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Another question came in here.
It's me.
Yeah. So are there limitations on when the money can come out distribution wise? Is that the question, Steven?
Yes. Yep.
So there's no limitations per se, except for that the IRS doesn't let you schedule something shorter than 2 years. So when you go to enroll, the earliest date you could choose would be January 1st, 2026, or any date after that. would be the only real limitation. And the fact that you've got to schedule it in advance. You can't just call up principal the day you want some money and say, give it to me now.
So you don't get like a checkbook that you could just kind of like, yep.
It is not a checking account. It is a retirement plan in the eyes of the IRS. They do want you to do longer term planning, which is why, again, going back to the making adjustments, you can't just, say I want to push it from December 31st to January 1st and push it to the next tax year. You got to push it off a sizable chunk of years.
Okay. So minimum 2 years before you could actually, and you'd have to schedule it in advance.
Correct.
Correct.
Separation, if you leave the company, any dollars would be that haven't paid out yet, but start paying out. Otherwise, for scheduled distributions while you're working, 1/1 of 26 would be the earliest date, or any date afterwards.
Okay, all good questions. Anyone else? Okay. Well, with that, we appreciate the time. Thanks, Josh, for the presentation. Stephen, for helping me set it up. And Steve, as always, appreciate your support in this. Look forward to hopefully seeing and speaking with some of you in December when the time comes. But in the interim, if questions come up, let us know. We're here to support. All right, take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.